Wow, that new Dune movie looks really good. I guess if I start making retrospectives on the previous adaptations now, I'll be just in time for... Ah, shit. So the new Dune adaptation has unfortunately been delayed, but a lot of people seemed keen on this video, so here it is. Real quick though, if you like what I do and want to help this channel grow, you can join me over on my Patreon as well as join my new YouTube members. For less than the price of a coffee, you can get to see new videos early as well as get access to some exclusive behind the scenes content along with numerous other benefits. Links and buttons will be down below. Dune, directed by David Lynch and produced by Dino De Laurentiis, debuted in 1984 to a mixed reception from critics and audiences alike. The film also failed to gain much traction at the box office, becoming a flop. However, since its release, it's developed somewhat of a cult following, with an extended TV cut being made in 1988, and numerous fan edits of the film have popped up over the years. Dune was of course written by Frank Herbert over a period of 6 years throughout the 60s. Originally published in a serial format, it was later collected and expanded into an epic novel, which was rejected over 20 times before finally being published by Chilton Books in 1965. The novel won a slew of awards and went on to become one of the best-selling science fiction books of all time. The first attempt at a film adaptation was in 1971, when the rights were optioned by producer Arthur P. Jacobs, who had produced the Planet of the Apes film franchise. He pursued Lawrence of Arabia director David Lean to helm the project. Progress was slow, however, and after Jacobs suffered a fatal heart attack, the project was shelved indefinitely. In 1974, producer Jean-Paul Gibbon purchased the rights for a new adaptation, famously to be directed by Alejandro Jodorowsky. This version of Dune has often been referred to as one of the greatest movies never made. Jodorowsky's adaptation was to be a 10-hour-long feature, with a cast that included Salvador Dali, David Carradine, Udo Kier, Mick Jagger, and Orson Welles, among others. He had assembled a team of star concept artists which included Jean Mobius Gerard, Chris Foss, and H.R. Giger, as well as Dan O'Bannon to supervise the visual effects. While Jodorowsky's adaptation made some big departures from its source material, author Frank Herbert was said to be quite excited by the adaptation. However, due to difficulties in raising the budget and finding distribution, Jodorowsky's version never saw the light of day. For those curious, there's a fantastic documentary all about this doomed project, Jodorowsky's Dune, which I highly recommend. After Jodorowsky's attempt stalled, the rights were then picked up by Dino De Laurentiis and Ridley Scott was brought on to direct in 1979, following the success of Alien, which H.R. Giger and Dan O'Bannon also worked on. Frank Herbert himself turned in his own screenplay, which was reportedly 175 pages long. De Laurentiis commissioned another draft to whittle it down. However, following the sudden death of his brother, Ridley Scott dropped out of the project and later went on to direct Blade Runner. The Dune adaptation once again stalled. By the early 80s, following the success of The Elephant Man, director David Lynch was receiving numerous offers for blockbuster films, including Star Wars Return of the Jedi. However, he opted to take on Dune as well as write the screenplay. This, despite having never read the book, heard of the book, or even had much interest in science fiction at all. Filming took place entirely in Mexico, with extensive location shooting, as well as the building of over 80 sets across 16 sound stages with a massive crew. Lynch intended for the film to be roughly 3 hours in length. However, for De Laurentiis and Universal Pictures, they demanded a 2-hour cut. The film was essentially taken away from Lynch in post-production, with the producers taking out several scenes and reshooting others without Lynch directing them. As a result, Lynch demanded his name be taken off any further releases of the film, and even disowned this one. Allegedly, however, Frank Herbert is said to have been quite pleased with the film, despite its flaws. Dune is a very visually striking film, with a huge amount of large, detailed sets and some spectacular production design. The visual effects are a bit of a mixed bag, however. The miniatures in general are all very strong, with terrific foreground miniatures specifically. However, it's the optical compositing which often results in washed out looking backgrounds and thick matte lines. It all feels a little unpolished in certain areas. Compared to the work done on Star Wars, Blade Runner, or Alien, Dune just doesn't hold up as well. The music was composed by American rock band Toto, with contributions from Brian Eno. Pink Floyd was originally signed to create the music for Jodorowsky's Dune, and so De Laurentiis sought to sign his own rock band for his movie's score. Toto would seem like an odd choice at first, but they honestly did a fantastic job. The score for Dune is fantastic. with a memorable main theme and heaps of atmosphere. It brings that large orchestral sound which John Williams often lent to his sci-fi work, but Dune carves out its own unique identity. Brian Eno's prophecy theme is particularly memorable for its ethereal atmosphere and dreamlike feel. While its visual effects don't stand the test of time as well as other aspects, Dune is still a feast for the ears and eyes to be sure. The cast are an awesome ensemble of stars and renowned character actors, too many to highlight individually in all honesty. Although Kyle MacLachlan is older than Paul in the books, he turns in a great performance. He does a solid job at portraying Paul's coming-of-age story from a young prince to a messiah-like leader. Trekkies will quickly spot Patrick Stewart several years before he took on the role of Jean-Luc Picard as Gurney Halleck. He doesn't get as much screen time, but his booming voice and commanding presence still manage to make him memorable to the viewer. And that goes for many of the cast. Not a lot of screen time for any one, but still really memorable. Sean Young as Shani, however, is really the only one who is forgettable. Her character is pretty underwritten to begin with, and she suffers the most from the big cuts which were made to the film. However, much of the film's marketing was taken up by Sting as Harkonnen Prince Fade. He actually does pretty well as a sadistic villain, even if he says very little and only does something of note toward the end. He was a superstar at the time. However, there's one actor who had no idea.
I had never heard of Sting. I mean, that's how isolated I was from the music world. But I was aware that there was, because I'd been there a couple of weeks before Sting arrived, and when he arrived, there was this kind of frisson everywhere. You know, the whole of Mexico City was abuzz that Sting was coming. And so I heard he was a musician. That's all I knew. And so the second or third day, we're just hanging out on the set, and him and me, and I say, "So you're a musician?" And he said, "Yep." And I said, "What do you play?" And I swear, I crossed my heart. And he said, "Bass." And I said, "You know, I've often wondered, what is it like carrying that huge thing around with you everywhere you go?" And
All right.
I mean, God bless him. Sting said, "No, bass guitar. That's what I play." And I said, great. That's fantastic. Beautiful instrument. And like, "Are you a solo artist?" And he said, No, I'm in a band." And I said, "Oh, what kind of band?" He said, "The Police." Folks, I said, "You play in a police band?"
I think Dune is a movie which interests me more than I actually enjoy it. Its biggest problem is in its structure and world building. Even as a novel, Dune is a pretty dense read, which required Herbert to add an entire glossary of terms to fully convey his universe to the reader. Because of this, the book has often been called unfilmable. There are long bouts of exposition about certain aspects of the universe, but other times the viewer is left to piece things together on their own. We get a thorough breakdown of the galactic feudal system this empire works on, but there's actually a surprising lack of information about what spice actually does. There's emphasis placed on the space travel aspect, but there's virtually no info given about the mentats. As a result, I'm sure many audience members were a little confused by the various red-lipped people who populated the movie. Indeed, the backstory about a robot uprising resulting in a policy against developing advanced computers, necessitating the very need to use spice, is missing from the film. It was only later added into the TV cut as an opening prologue made up of various bits of concept art. There's also the bizarre inclusion of characters having audible inner monologues, portrayed in the film as the characters whispering their thoughts during scenes. It's a very odd choice. I can understand if this was used purely for exposition purposes, Paul clarifying what a hunter-seeker is, for example, but this is even used for things which are very clearly being conveyed visually in the scene. Unfortunately, it mostly takes the viewer out of the story rather than immersing them in the world. Barring some truly grotesque additions by Lynch, such as the Baron Harkonnen having boils and sores, the heart plugs, the squishy rat juice box things, etc., I do believe it's likely there was a solid 3-hour film here at one point or another. There's a lot of great work being done in front of the camera, it's just a shame the end result became so mangled in the editing phase. That being said, the movie does have a certain allure to it. This was my first experience with Dune. I saw it as a child and was frankly completely baffled by the whole thing, but it made me want to know more and eventually led to me picking up the novel and checking out the other adaptations. I can understand why the film has amassed such a dedicated cult following. While it's not the most entertaining or even enjoyable of films, it's certainly a fascinating one. Rob Kemp asks, what is your favourite non-canon Star Trek story? Okay, so I've banged on enough about Star Trek Destiny. It is that by a significant margin, but I've already mentioned it loads. So instead I wanted to bring up the Vanguard series, which was partly written by Destiny's author David Mack. I think this is a really cool series which feels like several seasons of a Star Trek TV show. It's basically about a team on a space station covertly researching a strain of highly complex DNA which was found on an alien world called the Taurus metagenome. It's a series which mixes in lots of political intrigue with some ancient alien shenanigans, and it does it really well. I really like that the Tholians are so heavily involved in the story. We don't really see them that often in the shows because they're quite expensive to render in live action, so I'm glad we get to explore them in this series. I also really like how diverse the cast is in terms of their background. There are Starfleet officers of course, but we also get lots of characters from outside of Starfleet and the Federation. It gives the cast that DS9 type of chemistry, which is always rewarding to the reader. Thanks for watching. If you like what I do and want to see more videos, subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay up to date on all my new uploads. If you like what I do and want to help the channel grow, join me over on my Patreon where you can see videos like this early. Speaking of which, I'd like to quickly thank all of my patrons who are now appearing on screen. Have a good one, and as always, live long and prosper.